What's good, people? Time for another Magic Man review. We've got a good one this time. This is America's Final War by Andrei Martyanov. Okay, Andrei, forgive me if I don't get your name right. I'm not a Slavic speaker. And I really hope he's right. I hope this is America's Final War because I'm kind of sick of these wars. Give peace a chance, baby. You know what I'm saying? Good book. This is not the first one I've read from him. I think I read Disintegration, or was it Losing Supremacy? He's got a couple good books out and puts out a lot of information that it really doesn't get out there in the mainstream press or the media. Stuff on. If you watch television, you're not gonna understand this book. So that's why I think, for like normies and conformies, this is a next level book. Okay, once you start getting to the top, you can start reading stuff like this, and it really opens up your eyes. Keep in mind, Andrei's guy is biased. He's a Russian guy. He admits it himself. At least he's honest. We've all got our biases. Let's just get into it. It really starts off with a bang. He talks about the echo chamber, about the American media or the Western media, and how it's an echo chamber. People are just saying the same thing, and they're just bouncing off of themselves. And to be fair, there are echo chambers in the alternative media as well. Before the war in Ukraine began, before Russia invaded, a lot of the people in the alternative media or the dissident media, they're saying, oh, Russia's not going to invade Ukraine. I mean, who wants Ukraine? I mean, nobody wants the Ukraine on their balance sheet, which made sense. Do you want the Ukraine on your balance sheet if you're Russia? No. Certain parts of it, yeah, okay. But you're going to have to go in there and rebuild it, and you're going to have to police it, and you're going to have to spend a whole bunch of money that you don't want to spend. But guess what? It happened. And I believe Andrei was one of the guys who were saying that it wasn't going to happen, but he later went on and said, "Hey, listen, I didn't see it coming." I think that's he said that. If you watch his blog and watch his videos, you'll see that he admits when he screws up or he gets something wrong. And he even admits his own bias. This is one of the things I like about watching his videos and reading his blog. Okay. One of the things that I think a lot of people who weren't born here, who immigrated here, or who are outside looking in, and a lot of Americans too, they don't really, this is just my speculation, but when you read some of their material and how they look at America, they don't really realize what America is. And in my opinion, America is not really a country, it's a business. It's always been that way. If you go back to we talked about, we read the book about the Indian slave trade. It was a business before Europeans got here. It's always been a business, always been transactional. That's, like Japan is a country. I can't immigrate to Japan and become Japanese. That's just outlandish. I can speak the language, I can become a citizen of Japan, but I'll never be Japanese. Okay? Here it's different. You come here, hey, you set up shop. Oh, you're an American. Yeah, it's a business. It's a business. That's just me. Don't you can say, he's unpatriotic. Get out of here. All right. He's a good writer. He's a good writer. It really is. I was reading this little part where Vladimir Putin was talking about different aspects of the American media. And I was like, wait for it. And Andrei just nails it. He's like, it's propaganda. I was like, yeah, of course it's propaganda. I was like, I put it in the book and I was waiting for him and he delivered. And it was like, of course it's propaganda. One thing I always try to, I'm trying to pick a few bones with Andrei. He constantly denigrates the Iraqi army. Okay, he's like, oh, you Americans, you beat the Iraqi army in the Gulf War. That's no big deal. These guys are incompetent. Listen, what was left over when the United States, the coalition beat the Iraqi army in 1991 during the first Gulf War. That's what was left of the Iraqi army after 10 years, basically 10 years of fighting the Iranians in the Iran-Iraq war. Okay? You, even then in 1991, it was a shattered army. Okay, they were professional people. The Iraqis aren't stupid, you know. Um, in 2003, they didn't even have that. Remember they had the Fedayeen Saddam. You know, the guys, the one with the Darth Vader helmets. You remember that? That was a trip. Um, One of the things he talks about, and he talks about in this book and in the blog, is that when the United States brought over a lot of the National Socialists after the Second World War, they influenced our way of thinking, specifically about how the Second World War turned out in the Eastern Front. Okay, and he says as Americans, we don't understand that, and there's a lot of truth to that. But what Andrei doesn't get to is it was Americans in the West, the British and Americans, who built up National Socialist Germany. Okay, during the war, the British got pissed. They got a little bit mad at the Americans because said, "Hey, we were going to bomb this factory over here. You're giving us a lot of slack. How come we can't bomb this factory?" He says, "Well, because it's a Ford factory. That's why you can't bomb it. It belongs to us." They were hot. And even during the Nuremberg trials, you had one of these SS officers saying, "How can you put us on trial? These are your ideas. We didn't think this stuff up ourselves. These eugenics ideas, they came from you guys." Okay, so a lot of hidden history there. America built up National Socialist Germany, and it was built up to fight the Soviet Union. Americans didn't even want to be in the war. Harry Truman said, "What do we care?" Before he was president, he was like a senator. He's like, "What do we care if the Germans and the Russians just slaughter each other? Great, it's a win-win for us. Why do we care?" So, a lot of hidden history in there, and you just really got to go back and look at this stuff and do your research into the history. One of the things he does harp on, and have to acknowledge this because I dropped all over the place. I dropped to Maryland, dropped to the mountains, dropped to North Carolina. America is a provincial country, and he's absolutely right. Get out of the cities, and it's closed off. They don't really look at the outside world. They just know what they know. Oh, this is a lumber town. This is where we do lumber. This is a steel town. It's where we do steel. Oh, this is a mining town. It's where we do mining. This is a farm town. It's where we farm. There's Amish going down the roads, for Christ's sake, okay? And they're little buggies. But it is. He's right. It's not totally like that, but yeah, Andrei knows what he's talking about for the most part. A lot of the people in the alternative media, this is another one of bone, not just with Andrei. They're saying, well, the Ukraine war didn't start when the Russians invaded. The Russo-Ukraine war started when there was a coup in Kiev in 2014, and they overthrew the government, and they installed these National Socialist types, pro-Ukraine, Slava-Ukraine types. I want to say it goes back even before that. When I was stationed at Camp Lejeune in 1997, 1998, I believe it was, I had surgery, hernia surgery, so I was kind of down and out, and people were bringing me my lunch when I was just chilling, couldn't work. And during lunchtime, I would see these guys around our barracks. They were staying there, but it was kind of kept on the down low. It was Ukrainian paratroopers. They were being trained at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, back in 1997, 1998. And this stuff goes way back. I think it really started the minute the Soviet Union dissolved. America couldn't wait to get in there. All that stuff in there that we could, take it to the Ruskies. Yeah. Another thing he points out in the book, and it does a lot of. It's funny. You've got to read this book. It's funny. It got a really good sense of humor. He talks about Western journalism and how it's like a fraud. That's nothing new. That's really nothing new. Back in the day, they called it yellow journalism. For the watchers of this channel, I want you to go research the history behind the Pulitzer Prize. And you'll realize this is nothing new. They've been lying us into wars forever. Come on. Humans are going to human. Remember the motto of this channel. Humans are going to human. All right. Now, let's get into it. Get some more to the notes. Oh, one thing I got to pick a bone with Andrei and a lot of the other guys in there. And they're talking about, we dropped atom bombs on Japan when they were ready to surrender. First and foremost, Japan was not ready to surrender. Okay, they wanted an armistice, which is different from a surrender. An armistice meant for Japan, they got to lick their wounds, maybe keep Korea, maybe keep Manchukuo, keep some of their territories that they won, and they make a deal where they get to, their military they get to rebuild their military. It's the same thing that Germany did after the First World War. They get to lick their wounds and come back and fight another day. The Americans were like, no, we're not doing that this time. We did that with the Germans, and they came back for another day. You're going to surrender. Atom bomb didn't make them surrender, okay? What did make them surrender was a combination of many things. One, they firebombed almost every single Japanese city to the ground. I think it was one of the American Air Force, Army Air Force generals, maybe Hap Arnold. It was one of those Air Force generals like, if we lose this, I'm going to be charged as a war criminal. Because he burned every Japanese city to the ground, okay? Firebombed them to the ground. We had an oil embargo, unrestricted submarine warfare against the Japanese, their merchant ships, their warships, all their ships. And some little other known facts of the Second World War. Okay, so the Japanese were occupying Korea and Manchuria. I think they called it Manchukuo. They had the puppet emperor. The former emperor of China was the leader of Manchukuo. And the Americans, Truman at the time, they said to the Soviet Union, "Hey, we want to get this war over with. We're suffering a lot of casualties in the Pacific." The Japanese strategy was to bleed the Americans white into the face. So by the time they got to the home islands, they would be ready to stop the war with an armistice that was favorable to Japan. But the Americans were like, no. So they talked to the Russians and said, hey, listen, send your armies east and smash them. And the Russian army did. They sent their armies east and they smashed the Imperial Japanese army that was still in Asia. In Korea, Manchuria, I forget. But they smashed the Japanese army. And the atom bombs were the cherry on top, okay? Even then, the Japanese were like, well, do we surrender or do we keep on fighting? Because they didn't know how many atom bombs we had, And it was a tie. Half of them wanted to surrender, half of them didn't. The emperor was the final one. And he made a record to play to the Japanese people and said, hey, listen, we're surrendering. Even then, they had some nutball officers that tried to overthrow the emperor. And, but people try to, poo-poo America. Oh, you dropped the atom bombs on, the Japanese. They were ready to surrender. Those people were fanatics. Just look up the stuff the Japanese did during the Second World War and before, the war began for them earlier because they were fighting all over the place. We tend to think of 1941 during Pearl Harbor, but they were fighting long before that. Go look at the stuff that they did. Those people were ruthless, all right? Humans are going to human. Don't want to make this too long, get into it too much, but some of the stuff in here about, different Marxist stuff, I really don't want to get into with Andrei, but the Soviet Union was expansionist too. America's not the No, we are not the good guys that we say we are. We're spreading democracy all over the world, but neither was the Soviet Union. Before the World Wars, in the middle of the World Wars, in between the First World War and the Second World War, the Soviet Union invaded Poland, okay? And the Polish got lucky because the Soviet Union was superior to them in both the man and material. They were able to break their codes, and they were able to outmaneuver the Soviet army and send them packing. But they got lucky. But the Soviet Union was expansionist, Okay, so a lot of shade being thrown sometimes, but it takes people who know a little bit of history to kind of throw it back a little bit and say, hey, listen, bro, come on now. You know your history just as well as I do. You know your Andrei knows Russian history better than I will. The one thing about this book, it's a great book. I'm telling you what, you're gonna his sense of humor is kind of droll and cynical, and I like that because I'm a little cynical myself. But it's funny. It really is. Some of the stuff he points out, you just gotta read. But the one thing I really wanted him to talk about, because this book is mostly about the Russo-Ukrainian War. I'm not gonna call it special military operations. I was in the military and I hate acronyms. I'm not going to say all that crap all the time. It's the Russian-Ukrainian War, okay? But one of the things he doesn't get into, and is really disappointed, and I know he knows this, is when he talk about a lot of the flash, and so the guys on the internet do the same thing. But what you really need to understand is logistics and support. You cannot have a war without logistics and support. Most people don't know this. You can see all the fancy videos with the guys fighting, shooting their machine guns and stuff like that, and firing mortars and tanks. That's all the fancy stuff. But what you don't see is behind the scenes. The guys trucking that ammo to the front. The guys, putting the warheads on, putting the timers on, doing the laundry, moving the food up to the front. You think that's easy under drone surveillance? No. Hell no. The guy's putting the fuel in the truck. The guy's getting the potable water. We used to call it the 3 B's. Beans, Band-Aids, and bullets. Okay? If you don't have that, you don't have a functioning army. If you don't have diesel fuel, your army is done. If you don't have water, your army is done. You don't have food, you don't have medicine, a whole lot of different stuff. Just look at the train lines they have to use to truck all that stuff up to the front. Look at all the people in the rear that had to do all the different stuff to keep that army in the field. You got dentists, you got doctors, you got your admin, making sure these guys get paid, I don't know how it is in the Russian army, but I would be surprised if it was less than half. But in the American armed forces, only 1/4 of it is fighting men. Guys who are out there, putting rounds down range. The other 3/4 is logistics and support. Okay, you have to have engineers to get through those minefields. You have to have engineers to plan all this stuff out. I can't go on enough about it. How important logistics and support is for a war. You got to have mechanics to do maintenance on all your stuff, or it breaks down. You have to have guys repair stuff when it breaks down or it gets hit. You got to put a new turret on a tank. Take the tank off there's one tank that's been hit a landmine and the tracks are all messed up. The gearbox is screwed up. So you take the turret off that one, you put it on a new one. You need all kinds of stuff for that. It just doesn't happen like that. It's too many stuff that you watching like these movies where the guy's got the never-ending magazine. He's like, oh, that's not real war, okay? It's just not. And that's one of the things I was a little disappointed about. But the book overall, I like it. I've never been disappointed in any of his stuff. He does talk a little smack. Oh, the Americans, they don't know anything about fighting Russians. They don't know continental warfare. And overall, he's absolutely correct. Okay, on the scale that we're talking about. But this isn't the Red Army here we're talking about in Ukraine. This is the Russian army, all right? And another little known fact of history is Americans have fought Russians before on Russian soil. During the Russian Revolution, Americans sent an expeditionary team, and we were allied with Czechoslovakians. I believe there was a French contingent as well. I'm not too sure on that one. But we were fighting on the side of the white Russians, okay, against the red Russians, the communists. And you know what? The American public didn't even know they were there until the body bags started coming home. And then they raised a big stink and they had to send them back. Okay, so we fought the Russians before, Didn't win. But, you know, the history of Russia and the United States goes back a while. I mean, we bought Alaska from them, you know. Uh, and the roots of the Ukrainian war go back a long time, too. I am thoroughly convinced a lot of the reasons that we've got a real stick with Russia. I don't. But certain elements of certain people, going back to the pogroms that happened during the Tsarist Russia, that's one of the reasons why we're at odds with Russia. Because the Soviet Union's gone, you know. And even then, the Soviet Union was our ally in the Second World War. They helped to end it for us by invading the East and kicking the crap out of the Japanese. It wasn't the atom bombs. They still had armies in the field, okay? Alright. But you have to take Andrei and a lot of all these guys with like a grain of salt. It's like, listen, he's got his own point of view. He's got a Eurocentric point of view. And a lot of times they can be like, oh, you Americans, you don't know anything, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, whatever, dude. You know, I still read the stuff. I still think it's good stuff. But you have to keep that in the back of your mind, where he's coming from, his point of view, his upbringing. And anytime they laid on real thick, and Andrei can do that if you read his blog. Anytime they laid on real thick about how America is, you know, this horrible place, you know, built on slavery, blah blah blah. Listen, a little history about the formation of Russia. Okay. Back in the day, Scandinavians were invading the Baltics and Eastern Europe and enslaving the Slavic people. They were taking them down to the Black Sea and into the Mediterranean, and they were selling them into slavery. That's how they were making their money. And they had amber and different stuff like that, but it was mostly human trafficking. All right. Now, one group of these Scandinavians, they said, you know what? This is really dangerous. And we can make more money if we just set up on this outpost right here on this river called the Dnieper River. We could set up at this outpost right here and charge people to come down the river. And these people were called the Rus. And the outpost was named, I don't know if they took it over or they built it themselves, but it was called Kiev. And these people are called the Kievan Rus. And that's where Russians come from. Okay? These were not nice people. They were engaged in human trafficking. If you didn't pay their fee to go down the Dnieper River, they would kill you and take your cargo, you know, whether it was slaves or amber or what have you, and they would sell it themselves, okay? Am I saying this to, you know, to crap on Russians? No. What I'm trying to say is humans are going to human. People have been doing all kinds of nasty stuff since, you know, the beginning of time. Are Americans doing nasty stuff right now? Hell yeah. Does it have the support of the American public? No. A lot of this stuff goes on in the American people. They're provincial. They don't know. They don't care. You know, when their sons come back home in body bags, yeah, they care. But people don't join the military like they used to. All right, and even the Ukrainians themselves, they voted for Zelensky because he ran on the peace platform. Same thing with Wilson. Same thing with Roosevelt. They ran on a platform to keep us out of the wars. And what do? They found a way to get us right into them. All right? It's no different. It's yellow journalism. Okay? I really want to take a little special time out at the end of this video. Again, America's Final War by Andrei Martyanov. I don't think it's going to be our last war. I think the last war is going to be when they turn the guns on the American people. That's just my opinion. That's going to be the last war. But I wish it was America's Final War because I'm kind of, you know, sick of it. Give peace a chance. But I wanted to promote Andrei. He's got a blog, Reminiscence of the Future, but you can look it up by typing in SmoothieX12, and it'll take you to his blog. And the same thing with his videos on YouTube. So go check him out. Good information. I watch him on a regular basis. His book came out. I knew I had to read it. I read one of his other books before, and it's a good feather in your cap, you know. And if you're one of these rah-rah patriots, everything America does is great, just read the book. Read some of the other books, and, you know, get a different perspective, you know. All right, till next time, keep it real, people.